Recently, I posted a video where I tried to beat Sonic Frontiers without jumping. For multiple reasons, the majority of the cyberspace stages were skipped or just skimmed over, which is why in this video, we'll be giving them their time to shine. Let's go through them one by one and answer the question, how many jumps does it take to beat every Sonic Frontiers cyberspace stage? As explained in the main video, I rebound the jump button to right on the D-pad, so if we're ever forced to press it, we'll know that's wrong. Everything else is fair game, and unlike in the main video, we'll have both Power Boost and the Spin Dash available, which will change some things up. Going in order starting from Chronos, 1-1 has a single section where you're expected to jump, but we can use bounces with the B button and a mid-air boost to get past. We can also homing attack enemies from the ground without using the jump button, which gives us a lot of useful mobility in this stage and basically every other one. In 1-2, we have our first bit of rail grinding. As long as there are rails in parallel, Sonic can always transfer between them with the analog stick, not the jump button, which is great. Otherwise, our only way to get off of rail is to fall off, which will be relevant later on. 1-3 is our first entirely 2D level. Like in 1-2, there are some spikes along the path which we can either bounce over or damage ourselves and run through. Also, there are multiple steep slopes, which are great for showing off the Spin Dash's ridiculously low traction. Out in the open world it's even more broken, but still in cyberspace, the Spin Dash can give us some airtime with even the smallest of ramps, often when we're not even trying to. Nothing new in 1-4, it's nice and breezy. Likewise for 1-5, aside from this part where the game wants us to jump right here, and while we don't have a ledge to run off and initiate a boost bounce chain, we can still run backwards into the slope, do backflip onto a different track, or just spin dash to catch some air. 1-6 is another side-scrolling level, and there are a couple of spots that we can actually get stuck on the ground with no way to initiate a bounce, so we would have to reset. Otherwise, there's not much to say here, so I'll share that this is actually one of the 2 Frontier stages that I actually tried speedrunning. My time was never all that amazing, but it's fun because this level requires a couple solid mag dashes, or homing boosts as I believe the developers calls them, which allow Sonic to fly across the stage. As you can see here in 1-7. It's not required, but man, it looks so cool to avoid all that City Escape inspired platforming and the obnoxious horizontal bars. Moving on to Ares Island, 2-1 provides us with a few rocks that block the bottom path, which can be easily bypassed with a lightspeed dash through the nearby rings. 2-2 is the other Ares Island stage I covered in the main video. As explained there, this one is a little dangerous without jumping, but very doable. At the start of 2-3, we have to avoid this directional launcher, which would require the jump button. Everything else is pretty simple. 2-4 is unique, as it's the first one thus far that seemed impossible until I understood Sonic's capabilities near the end of my playthrough. Following the track forward, we can get past this pit with the help of the giant stairs that raise out of the abyss, and either boost or homing attack across this pit to the part with the 2 ramps. Both ramps take us to the exact same spot, a loop that forces Sonic onto a horizontal bar. The solution, of course, is to avoid going through the loop entirely, which can be done by painstakingly bouncing or spin dashing into the air and landing on the rail, then running along it to a point where we can launch ourselves forward. The rest of the platforming is easy once we escape the bar. Another first for the video, 2-5 is the first stage that's actually just impossible to complete without jumping. This becomes apparent a few seconds into the level, where Sonic is dropped into a 2D section, where the only way up is with these moving bars that Sonic cannot dismount without jumping. I pushed on, and after working my way through the rest of the level, it turns out everything else is completely possible without jumping. The only issue is right here at the start. While there's not too much space to work with, I did manage to bounce like so, boost over, and land on the top bar without jumping, which then allows me to jump once to get off, so just one jump for this stage. 2-6 is super doable jumpless, but it's very annoying. As you may recognize, this stage is very similar to Skyrail from Sonic Adventure 2. Unlike in that game, we can utilize propeller springs without jumping, but unfortunately, Sonic has next to no horizontal momentum when using the propeller springs, so getting away from them without an air boost is like pulling teeth. 2-7 is another 2D level, and it's filled with multiple moving horizontal bars. Also, near the start is this tricky bit where the game expects you to utilize this bar, but boosting up the slope pops Sonic into the air, letting you air boost onwards. Chaos Island starts out with an easy stage, recreating elements of Green Forest from Sonic Adventure 2. The falling platforms at the very end can cause issues because we have to quickly run off, boost back, and start a bounce, but otherwise, it's not too bad. As mentioned in the main video, 3-2 has a few obstacles. The first ramp sends us towards a horizontal bar, but we can boost bounce along the bottom path to avoid it. Another couple of bars stand in our way, but bypassing them isn't too hard. Our progress unfortunately comes to a halt when we're dropped onto the final 2D section that expects you to circle up and around to the goal. Without the spin dash, progress gets blocked right here by the directional launcher, which requires a jump button. But with the spin dash, we can actually bypass it with one of the nearby slopes to find a horizontal bar blocking our path. It's really annoying because all we would need to do is get onto the rail, at which point we can platform to the goal, but since we're stuck in 2D and we're limited by the nearby slopes, we can't get up anywhere. Wait, actually that's not true. You can instead stand right about here where we're just inside the range where we can homing attack the horizontal bar, but we want to hold the opposite direction with the analog stick and boost to do a mag dash, which sends us backwards and up, allowing us to hit this spring, which takes us directly into the goal. So even without the really cool speedrun trick, this level is doable without jumping. 3-3 is inspired by Sky Sanctuary from Sonic Generations, and it's not all that difficult or complex, just a lot of boosts and bounces with plenty of spots to fall into the void if you're not careful. 3-4 is exactly as I described in my main video because Power Boost and Spin Dash do nothing to change this level because you're always on a rail. Still, quickly going over it, there is very little rings that we can collect, and we're forced to take damage from lasers and spikes along the path, so having a high defense is required for this level for it to be doable jumpless. Likewise, 3-5 doesn't change all that much because even without any of our silly techniques, you just drift to the end. It's annoying, but no jumping needed. 3-6 is a bit different, but also not really. Playing normally, we would get stuck on this launcher, which requires a press the jump button. It's possible to circumvent this by performing a mag dash off of this nearby balloon, but with spin dash, we can actually just spin dash away off this platform and then air boost to reach this balloon, which is actually also kind of speedy, so it's like fun to do. Unfortunately, we make our way to this problem spot. I tried to use the spin dash, but I couldn't catch any air, and I don't think that a mag dash will work, so I don't think we're going over the wall. But I did try going under the wall, because Sonic does this weird thing when you hold left trigger and move slowly. Like, he'll just roll, but not in the spin dash, which has an odd kind of low gravity element to it. While in this ball form at any time, including mid-air, if you press right trigger to boost, he will immediately do the spin dash, which gets us kind of far, but the kill plane is pretty high up and the checkpoint is much farther, so I don't think that's going to work. By default, going up the sticky walls forces us to jump back and forth repeatedly. If you initiate the jump chain after bouncing and sticking to the left wall right here, you'll have your air boost handy, which lets us save a jump at the top, cutting it down to 7. From there, we can bounce and boost our way to this checkpoint, where we're met with a line of launchers, which expects us to jump like too many times. Instead, we can land on this platform and then do a spin dash off and then air boost to get past the section. Onwards, the rest of the level is maybe a little annoying, but it uses all of the standard strategies that I've covered thus far, so this level takes 7 jumps, which is 7 more than I wanted, but much less than I had feared. The final cyberspace stage for Chaos Island isn't too hard, but it has an interesting beginning. If you run straight, you'll head down the foreground lower path, where we get to the spot with 3 enemies and a movable block. I initially thought that this was an issue, as you have to boost into the block to move it, but then how do you start bouncing again? Well, you could just homing attack an enemy and then bounce before landing. Since that didn't occur to me at first, I instead backtracked from that first ledge while bouncing, and found that Sonic will just automatically land on the background path right about here, allowing us to freely head along the upper path, because sure, why not? With Spin Dash, we can instead easily launch up to the upper path without any extra input. Beyond that, the rest of the stage is pretty simple. Finally, let's look at all of Oranos' stages, which I skipped entirely with fishing. The first one is a fun recreation of Metal Harbor from SA2, though rather than a rocket, you get funneled onto a cannon, which does require the jump button. Instead, we can avoid that section with a mag dash using the enemy right before the checkpoint. 4-2 is a personal favorite in terms of overall aesthetics and layouts, but nothing special is needed to reach the goal. 4-3 provides some fun spots to mag dash to save time, but they're not required to reach the end without jumping, just a lot of bouncing. Unfortunately, it's not all sunshine and chili dogs. 4-4 has a number of tricky spots, and without the power boost and spin dash, I hit a roadblock very early on. Making our way past the first checkpoint requires just boosts and bounces. I know I've been saying that a lot. And then we have the first rail section. Immediately we have a gap that we can just barely cross by boosting leading up to the gap and then boosting again right after. Then we have spikes we have to grind through, which hurts. And then this part where we're expected to jump. Boosting right after falling off of this rail will propel Sonic forward and up into the orange ring, allowing us to continue onwards. The rest of the rail section to the checkpoint needs some reasonably timed transfers with the analog stick. Moving past the platforming, we'll be launched onto a rail where we're expected to hop onto this box. Instead, boost under and past it, which gets just close enough to homing attack a balloon. And then, following the loop up, we're again expected to jump, but instead we can use the light speed dash to force Sonic up onto the rail. Fast forwarding a bit, the last obstacle becomes apparent after this checkpoint, where a spring sends us up through some rings and onto rails where we fall to our death. The game really wants us to jump into the rainbow rings, enough that they moved the next rail section forward and up, so we can't just air boost over to it. There is a 10 ring on the middle rail that, if we got close enough, we could probably light speed dash to, but getting there seems impossible. I thought maybe it's possible to use the spin dash or power boost to launch Sonic up, which we can, but it's nowhere near high enough. I also considered using the mag dash to launch up and forwards, but this entire area has the camera locked looking forward, so I don't think we can do that. Ultimately, I settle for doing as little as possible, which means jumping and boosting through the rainbow rings to this section, and then the final set of rings is too high to boost into, and you cannot interrupt a rail transfer with an air boost, so I had to jump again, which means that this stage requires 2 jumps. Unfortunate. Thankfully, 4-5 is way more accessible. With power boosting, we can just do the level as normal. I didn't even need to use the bounce, which makes this a really special stage. 4-6 is another 2D level, but there's no bottomless pits, and we always have springs and ramps to get airborne as needed, so it's nice and easy. And 4-7 is just like 1-6, as it's the other level I bothered to learn to speedrun. Just look at those mag dashes. It's so satisfying. You get so much speed and so much height. Thankfully, we can also reach the end with very boring bounces. Almost done. 4-8 is a short level where it's easy to mess up and fall into the abyss, but jumping is not at all required, even when playing normally. And finally, 4-9 consists of 2 skateboarding sections broken up by a brief bit of platforming. All that said, it's time to wrap things up. The final jump count is 0 jumps for Kronos, 1 jump for Ares thanks to 2-5, a disgusting 7 jumps on Chaos Island, all in 3-6, and 2 more jumps in 4-4, adding up to a grand total of 10 jumps needed to complete all of Cyberspace. While that is far more than I would have preferred, it is far less than I had feared. Perhaps with future discoveries or better execution, we could shave off a couple jumps here and there, but I think that's where we're going to end this video. Thank you so much for watching, big thanks to my channel members for their support, and a Cyberspace-sized thanks to Captain Crayfish for being a super fan. If you enjoyed this video and haven't seen the main one on Sonic Frontiers, go check it out. Otherwise, I have other Sonic Challenge videos, Easter egg stuff, glitches, all kinds of fun stuff. That's it. Bye-bye.